All right, guys. So what we're going to do today is talk about how to um, do blends throughout colors and throughout values, because that's what you're going to be winding up doing in your painting eventually anyway. You're going to be doing dark to light fades, color transitions. You're going to be doing highlights and shadows and making those blend into middle values. And so what I wanted to do is show everybody how to do that and make it look good, okay? And so this is a simple version of this, but it works the same way with whatever part of your painting you're working on, okay? And so the key is when you're blending to use wet paint with wet paint. If you let things dry out and then you try and push a blend into that color, it's just not going to work. You're going to wind up getting streaky paint. It's not going to blend anyway. You're just going to have like one value on top of another value. Okay, and so what we're going to do first is go ahead and you can use red paint on these just because they're easy to see. And so the goal is I'm going to make like just a basic rectangular shape that I can do a fade in, okay, or a blend in, right? Doesn't have to be perfect, just get the shape in there, okay? And give it some length because we're going to try to go from black to red to white, okay? Now the key is to keep the paint wet so that the colors can blend together, okay? So once I get me a nice coat of red paint in there, and that's going to dry pretty quickly, so you got to work fast, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and do the dark end into the red, okay? And like we talked about before, when you mix colors or blend colors, you always start with the lightest color first and add to that. So what I'm going to do down here, and I'm not going to mix this up yet, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some black over the top of that red. All right. Now I don't need a lot because the black is so strong. Once I start to push it over here, it's going to eat that red up. And so you got to always go real easy with the dark color when you're going into a lighter color. Okay. And so once I've got that, I'm going to keep these two brushes as they are. Okay, work with two brushes, right? And so what I want to do here is I want to start to blend this black out a little bit. Now don't take it too far because like I said, it's not even really affecting it, right? But what I'm going to do is as I blend out, I'm going to take the pressure off the brush. So when I do this, I'm doing it very, very light pressure like this, okay? Because I don't want to drag black out there. Right? And while it's still wet, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get some red on my brush, come right in here, and I'm going to come to the edge of that black, go back in the black and start to pull it out into the red area. Okay? But you don't want to come back in and grab a lot of black, just a little bit. Okay? And I can throw some more red on this. And I want to stop right about there because I'm starting to pull some black over in an area where I want it to be red. And then you can always go back the other way. So you can take that, you can come back with more red, okay? And you can head back into the black. As you can see there, that's gotten real red, but look at how quickly the black absorbs that. You know, it's really picking it up. And you can kind of go back and forth. But you want to keep that paint area damp to where those colors blend together. Now, this isn't going to be real smooth right here, and that's okay. I'm just trying to show you how to create a transition, all right? If you have to go back into the red area to come this way, I've got black on my brush now. You need to wash that off, okay? So anytime you start to put a light value back into a dark value, and you've got that dark value on your brush from previous work, get the dark value off of there. You can see I still have red on there. That's okay. But I don't want any black in there. And then what I want to do here is So I want to come out here and I'm going to bring this red across that area. Okay. And so the light's kind of hitting it there, but I've got a pretty nice, there you go, you can see it. It's got a fade, it's a little choppy, but you can see where I'm blending those values together, and that's what you're looking for. The key is using wet paint on both, okay? And if you want to, you know, I can come in here and I can start to pull some more. I've still got plenty of black paint here that's damp. I can pull out here, and as I come into the red, I just take the pressure off my brush, okay? All right, that's looking pretty good. Yeah, that's not bad, okay? And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go the opposite end. I'm going to go white into the red. So the goal would be to have white to pink to red to maroon to black, okay? So since we're going to a light value, which is the white, got to clean that brush off, get all that black out of it, okay? So I want 2 clean brushes. So the other brush that has the straight black in it, clean that completely out. Make sure, like, I'm doing that on the edge of my cup there, and I'm making sure there's no black coming out of the brush, okay? So you can see that brush is clean, all right? Now I'm going to keep red in here because we're going to use red again, but I just wanted the black out of there. Okay. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to throw red back in this area because remember, this is already dried up now, so I want those paints to be wet. And so I'm going to take that red and just put it back into that area that I want to mix it. Like that, okay? Doesn't take a lot, but just dampen the paint up. And then just like I did on the other end here, I'm gonna put some white, and I'm not gonna mix it up, especially if you start to like put pressure on the red, it'll start to try and mix it, right? So then what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna pull this white out into the red. Like that. And you can pull it pretty far out because you can see how quickly the red's soaking that up. So you can pull out here, but just use real light brush pressure, okay? And then I'm going to clean my brush off again, and what I want to do now is I want to come back this way. Right? So you can see it's not blended yet, right? But you can see where I'm getting the value scale. I'm getting light to middle to red to, okay? And so I'm just going to keep coming out this way a little bit. And as I go towards the lighter, right, less pressure because you don't want it to mix. I'm going to throw some white on top of that. But I'm using real light brush pressure so I don't mix the paint too much. And I'm going to go ahead and bring this out this way a little bit more. Right. And once I get it where I want it, I'm going to bring it out this way. I try to use a brush stroke that goes the direction that I'm wanting the paint to flow. That's why I just go this way to kind of lay paint, but once I start to mix it, you know, I'm going to pull it out like that. Okay? Now to get that to, so I've got a good value right there, so what I want to do is I want to blend back this way. So what I do now, come back with that red brush, lay your red in the middle where you want it, and you can touch the black by now because it's probably dry. And then what I'm going to do is lightly start to feather this red in. Now you have to use really light pressure here because the red's going to overwhelm that white real quickly. Okay, so as I bring it this way, I'm barely touching the surface. It's not real smooth, but see how I'm getting that transition in there? Okay. And I'm just keeping the two paints. This part's damp over here, and then I'm adding the red paint into it there. Okay. You can come across a little bit. And then what I'm going to do there is I'm going to come back the other way with the one that I had previously. So I'm going to take this brush, come through here, and just drag it. But I'm using real light pressure. You got to watch what you're doing. Just let your eyes kind of tell your hand how much pressure to put on there, right? If I do that, I've now gotten a pretty good color blend. Okay, it's a value scale. So takes a little work. They have special brushes for blending, but that'll get the job done in the painting that you're working on, right? And if you need to blend a little more, what I do as well, if I got a blend, I knock the color out of there. I wipe that brush out to where I can just have a dry brush, and what that does is that just allows me to pull fresh paint over. And this takes practice, so just try your best on this. Don't get frustrated if it's not working for you. Just keep the paint damp and go back and forth a few times. Practice, this will give you good practice on having like a real feather-light touch. You can also come up and down here if you want to blend it, but you got to be careful because it'll make little up and down marks in here, right? And if I wanted to make this value even lighter over here, what I'd do here is I'd just come back and I'd throw the white back in here to brighten that side up, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of scrub it out here, depending on how light you want to go on the value. And then I'm just going to drag it this way. And you'll see same thing if I use like real light pressure, that red that's still damp there, yeah, that red there that's still damp, it'll start to soak up the white, and you'll wind up creating a nice transition. That's pretty good transition right there. Yeah, you just can't go and like lay the paint in there and expect it like the first pass to really kind of get a smoothness to it. You got to work it back and forth. But just remember, it's wet paint on wet paint, all right? But that's pretty good. Okay, so that's the first one. All right, and then the second thing we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to do this on a shape, right? So this is like a plain blend between flat areas, okay? And so what we're going to do next is, and you can leave the red and white on your brush, all right? So what I'm going to do next, what I want you to do is paint yourself a circle. Does not have to be perfect. Just make it round. And when you paint the circle, because we want it to have some roundness, what you want to do is when you paint, use a round brush stroke. So don't paint across, because that'll start to add like horizontal and diagonal strokes to it, and that makes it into a flat thing. So what I try and do is if it's round, right, I'm going to paint it using a brush stroke that kind of follows the shape of the object. So a circle being round, I'm going to use that, and it'll put like brush strokes in there that'll help make it look round. It's kind of one of those things that boosts what you're doing, okay? And so what we're going to do is we're going to put a light source up here. So the light's hitting on this side of the object, all right? So what I'm going to do, it's just like down here, we need a highlight, we need the middle value and the dark area, the shaded area. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put some white paint right here and just make a circle out of it, okay? That's more or less, that's called the hot spot, so that's where the light's like hitting directly on it. So if you ever see something plastic or shiny, light's hitting on it, it's making like it's making a reflection of the light. So you got that there, right? And then what I'm going to do, now my red paint's already dried out, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to make this like kind of circular. And I am going to put some pressure on my brush as I make my brush strokes so that I keep that roundness, all right? And then what I'm going to do is once I lay some of that paint in there, I'm going to come back with my red and just real easy, I'm trying to I'm trying to blend on the hard edge where that was pink to red. So I'm trying to make that blend together. And like I said, this is so you can't even see what I'm doing there. The touch is so light, right? And right there you can kind of see it looks like it's starting to fade together a little bit, right? And what I can do if I want to keep working that area is put more white paint on here. And see how if I go in that round circle, this thing's a sphere, so I'm using a circular motion. It just visually makes it, helps boost the roundness, okay? And you saw how fast that that red, you know, kind of ate that white up. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to come back up here and I'm going to make a round kind of shape up in here and just move away from the center of it to where it's got like a nice highlight and then it fades out there. Same thing, I can kind of come on the back side with my red brush. And all I'm doing is I'm scuffing along the edge of where the two values are, so where the light value is. Same thing, I can go back here if I'm like, oh, I made it too dark, right? I can come back in with my light one, just lightly brush it, okay? So that's how you blend. You got to get the two wet paints and then get on the edge where you have one value going to another value, and you got to come in here and you have to softly work on top of the edge of that. So I'm gonna recreate that hard boundary again and show you right there. So I'm going to come in and lay in some more red paint. Right, I'm going to do it in a circle. Lay in some red paint here. I'm going to kind of work over that, and then I'm going to come back with my white brush, and on that boundary there, light pressure, right? You're just kind of, they call it feathering because it's blending the two hard edges. So I'm just trying to collapse that hard edge to where you get values that run into each other and have a little bit of a softness to them, right? So that's pretty good. I'm liking that. Like I said, it takes a lot of back and forth work, okay? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the back side here, okay? So I got to have the shadow. So this is my red brush. It's clean. It doesn't have any white in it. So what I want to do, because I'm moving to black paint, is I want to wash all the white paint out of here. If you switch from dark to light at any time or light to dark, you can't have white or black in the brush, because if you do that, it makes gray. And if it makes gray, that's going to kind of mess up what you're doing. That's a whole nother color theory idea, okay? Now for the shadow part of this, all right, what you're going to do is you're going to come in with your black. You're going to make a line or a shape back here. Make sure you leave the back side open, because that's the glowing edge, all right? We need the glowing edge. So if I draw a line from my light, basically the light hits to here and then comes to the other side. So I'm going to move that black up a little bit, right? And then what I'm going to do here, this has to go all the way down here. And what I'm doing here is making a very thin crescent moon shape. Just like that. Okay? Because like I said, when we work shapes, you got to have a highlight, middle value, and shadow. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to push the black a little bit wider, but I'm not going to use full pressure because I don't want it to be pitch black out there. Right? And so once I have that, I've got that dark value established, I'm going to come back in here with the red paint, and I'm going to come along that edge of it and see if I can get that hard edge to blur out. Now if I bring a little black paint over here, it is okay, because that middle value can come a little bit further out. And in fact, I may actually go ahead and come back in with my black brush and lay some black out there to help me darken that value. All right? But what I'm going to do also is I'm going to come back with my red and I'm going to mix into it. And then same thing, because the black's going to eat that red up, I can actually come in here, that black over there is too dark, I can lay red over the top of it, and it'll knock the blackness back, it'll colorize it. And see how I'm kind of knocking away the black here, right? Kind of blending it in. That's looking pretty good right there. See if I can turn it to where the light didn't reflect on it. Yeah, see, that's pretty good. So I've got highlight, middle value, shadow, glowing edge back there, right? And I think I'm going to go back in and lay red like directly over the black. Now if I want it to be redder, I'm not pushing the red into the black. What I'm doing is just trying to lay red over the top of it. You really got to go back and forth. Just use really a light touch. And just like on this, if you're not getting it the first time, be patient. It takes practice. This is one of those things where it looks pretty easy, but it's not easy at all. Now at some point you do want the paint to dry, because you can see I'm picking my black up, right? You don't want to do that. So I'll come back in here with some black. Yeah, at this point it's kind of picking the black up, and so it's really, yeah, you got to let it dry at some point. So I'm going to lay some red over the top of it. So I'll kind of leave that. I mean, that's okay, but yeah, that's one of those things where you got to stop painting sometimes and let it dry, because see, it just kind of picks the paint up. But while that's drying, what I'm going to do as well is I'm going to make a drop shadow or a shadow to where the sphere looks like it's sitting on the table there. Okay, so for that I'm going to go back and just get my red paint, and then what I'm going to do here, I'm going to paint a line under the sphere. Now, because the light, boom, if you come across there, no light's getting here, so on that angle, that's where that stops. It doesn't go way out here because a shadow can't be in the light. So it's got to be under the ball a little bit. And then because of the light here, I'm going to go ahead and pull this out pretty far, because it's going to cast a pretty long shadow. And then what I'm going to do is round it off a little bit. Something like that. Okay? And then what I'm going to do there is, because we got to have that dark value, right? I'm getting a very little amount of black on my brush, and so there's no light getting here right directly under the sphere, and it's real dark where it starts to come out from under the sphere back here. But you have to fade that black out pretty quick because the light's coming around. But you want that dark, we call it the core shadow, it's the darkest part of the shadow. You want that to be where there's no light hitting. As you come this way out from under the ball, right, that's going to have just a little bit of black because there's starting to be light in the shadow. And notice I don't put any black out here because the middle of the shadow is the darkest. It does catch some light as it goes out, right? And so that's the core shadow. And then what I'll do here, same thing, I'm going to come back in and I'm going to blend those together a little bit. But see, same thing, I'm starting to pull some paint off of it because the paint's wet. So at some point I'm going to have to let that kind of dry. Okay? And so that makes a cool little drop shadow like it's sitting on the table. Okay? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back in, I'm going to brighten that a little bit, I'm going to darken that a little bit, I'm going to work back and forth, and then we should be done. So let me do that real quick. Make sure you clean your brushes off. If you got black on here, this is going to be my white brush, so I got to get all the black off. All right? And you can tell if you put on your paper, it's got a little black in there, you need to wash it out a little bit better, okay? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come back in here, and I'm going to kind of real lightly just put that little round part there. And at this point, you got to be real careful. So I've got a little red in my brush already, so I'm going to come and feather that edge. So I like that. I like that. That's good. I'm not going to mess with that anymore. I barely had any paint in my brush. I just kind of had water in there. I'm going to touch that up. And over here, I'm going to come back in here and I'm going to use some red. All right. And then I'm going to very carefully put a little black in there. But just in a crescent moon shape. And then on that edge, I'm just going to use real light pressure with the same brush just to kind of try and get that edge to soften a little bit. That's actually looking pretty good. Not too bad. Hopefully this will show you, you know, a lot of times we go in and start painting stuff, we just kind of plow through it and throw paint on there, you know, and just paint, 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 paint. But you got to have a little bit of finesse. You got to use a little bit of touch. And as you can see, this took a few minutes to do this. This wasn't just like oh, throw paint in there and blend it in, right? There's a technique and a touch to it. So I think the other part of that is just if it's starting to pull paint away from it, just let it dry and go back in and work on it some more. Like I'll probably let that dry and work that some more. But that's the basic way to do that. And really the only way to get better at it is to keep practicing. You're going to have a lot of opportunities to do that in your painting coming up. So, and the other thing is if you feel like you've messed it up when you're working on your paint, just remember if you let it dry, you can paint over it. So it's not like you paint it one time and you're like, oh no, I messed it up, it's busted, I can't fix it. You can always go back in there and paint over stuff. So don't let that worry you. I mean, painting is layering, so that's a big deal. So, okay, and I'm going to put a little more red in there. Maybe tidy up the edge here. But that's it. So, if you haven't done this exercise, the video will be available on Canvas. You'll need to go in there and just watch the video, go through it. And the main thing is, just do your best. All right? And we'll keep making improvements on our work. All right. Appreciate it, guys. We'll talk to you later.